Hey, I want to talk about a topic of whether or not new digital literacies can lay a fatal blow on text literacy. So we've got increased bandwidth, increased access to multimedia authoring tools that are really easy to use, and increased access to computing devices that are also easy to use. It's changing the equation. What do I mean by that? Well, now it's a matter of convenience where it could be easy, maybe not easier, but easy to exchange visual and auditory communications as opposed to written communications. You know, an English language arts teacher, a traditional one, would probably call me a heretic for saying that these new digital literacies could lay a fatal blow on text literacy. It'd scare the heck out of them. They'd say, oh my gosh, it's going to ruin. Kids aren't going to learn how to write. They're not going to learn how to read. In some respects, they may be correct. But the way I look at it is it's more a matter of convenience versus whether it's a better method. So let me share an analogy with you. When I was in high school, I worked in an athletic shoe store, and a woman came in with her son one day, and her son, with this big excited grin on his face, ran right up to the shelf and pointed at a pair of shoes and said, "Mom, I want those." To which she said, "You can't have those." He said, "Why not?" "Well, those have Velcro laces. Velcro straps. You'll never learn how to tie your laces." So he slumped down, sat down on the bench, defeated, as his mom continued to look for shoes with laces. Well, I, as a punk teenager at the time, and I'm sure her son, were thinking she just didn't get it. To me, I'm like, so what? If he's got the Velcro straps, he doesn't need to learn how to tie his laces. Now, in fairness to her, there was probably only one pair of shoes that he'd have that were Velcro laces, and the rest he'd need to learn how to tie. But it was more for us thinking about that cultural shift and the convenience we saw with those laces, as opposed to whether it was right or wrong or better. So those cultural shifts with technological advances continually make us think and look at our world differently. Let me give you an extension. We'll go back in time and think about pre-printing press. How did we exchange ideas pre-printing press? Well, for the common man, the majority of that exchange was verbal, right? The access to the written word, because it was so difficult to hand copy or use those fragile and expensive wooden presses that were inflexible, didn't create opportunities for the common man to absorb a lot of written text. So a lot of it was just verbal. Now granted, that was limiting because you had to be close to that person, you had to be face to face. But, you know, that was the primary means of exchange. Then Gutenberg comes about, right? And he invents a new way with the printing press, new technological advances to show that now you can mass produce text. And the common man has a new way to consume ideas and information. So it changed everything. Now, the need for reading and writing literacy significantly increased because you had great ways with the printing press to exchange messages. You didn't have to rely on being face to face with someone. Now, it could be written down, put through a printing press, and mass distributed. So let's jump forward quite a few years and extend those analogies and convenience and exchange of communication. So the telephone, right? Now, as opposed to newspapers and books and writing letters to someone, you could just pick up a phone and start talking with them and exchange your thoughts and ideas real time. It was exceptionally convenient. So for the common man, they preferred to just pick up the phone and start talking to their friend, coworker, whomever, as opposed to having to write it down and send it and wait for them to consume it, there's latent inefficiencies in that style of communication versus just picking up a phone and talking to them. Now, in another extension, you had the moving pictures, early movies, right? Now you had a way to exchange ideas to a mass crowd. Whereas the telephone was still a one-to-one communication, now visual imagery could be created and then distributed to the common man. The common man was not producing these movies, though. So there was that significant limitation to the ability to exchange those ideas. Television, as an extension on movies, created more real-time communication, whereas movies were very hard to produce, very expensive to produce, and then they were distributed, small topics. Now, television opened up entertainment and exchange of ideas and news and information that movies did not have the opportunity to do. But again, it was the elite producing these programs, producing this communication, the common man consuming it, but only the elite were producing it. So there was a disconnect in the ability to exchange ideas. Then along comes the internet, right? So we're jumping a little bit more current. But in the early days of the internet, bandwidth was still very restricted. So it was primarily text-based. You didn't see much exchange of video or audio in the early days of the internet. But as the internet moved out of the research labs and into the home, now people started thinking about the exchange of ideas in different ways. Newspapers, books, people started thinking about that differently in the way that they were consuming information. Now, it was still primarily the elite, those who had a little more sophistication in understanding how to produce these messages on the internet and getting them out there to the common man. But the common man had much greater access to information than what they had before in text-based format. So now, again, increases in bandwidth, increase in sophistication and ease of use of multimedia authoring tools, increase of access to computing devices. Now, the common man, as different from the movie makers, television producers, can produce his own messages and distribute those out to the other set of common men who are consuming them. So now we've lowered the barriers on what it takes to exchange ideas and thoughts. We don't have to rely as much on the written word. Now we can use video and audio to do that. So again, it's not a matter from an English language arts teacher's perspective of whether text literacy, written word, is superior or not. That's not the issue. It's what's more convenient. So I can sit here and I can exchange these ideas with you in a video format. You can see my gesticulation, you can see my props, you can see my emotion, as opposed to interpreting it out of the written word. So in fairness, I sat down and I wrote an outline. And I actually wrote this as an article. And I got to the end and I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. I'd be a complete hypocrite if I didn't record this and distribute this in a video format. So that's what I did. And I want you to think about that. How is text literacy going to change with that increased bandwidth, increased access to easy to use multimedia authoring tools, and increased access to easy to use computing devices? So will it lay that fatal blow on text literacy? Probably not. But like that Velcro shoe for the common man, will it be more convenient? I think so. What do you think?